Before the first coin flip, before the first kickoff, you just gotta check out the Sideline Sizzle with the youngest sports commentator in American radio. Here's Tristan Blackman with the Sideline Sizzle.
Welcome to another edition of the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. Any of you tuning in last week might have noticed that we didn't put out a new show. The reason for that is that I was actually in Louisville, Kentucky for the majority of last week at a conference. Now you might be thinking what an 18-year-old kid is doing at a conference in the middle of summertime. Well, I was in an organization called TSA, and no, not the Transportation Security Administration. TSA actually stands for the Technology Student Association, and I was at their national conference last week representing my former high school. For the conference, I competed in the audio podcasting competition and ended up placing 8th in the nation out of who knows how many entries. So, anyway, there's my alibi. However, where's ESPN's alibi? You know, the massive sports broadcasting company that recently fired about 20 media personalities, many of which whom you may know. What's their excuse for that? There's a full list of all the employees who were let go online, but some of the more notable names that I found were personalities like Steve Young, Susie Colbert, Todd McShay, and Max Kellerman. Of course, the list goes on, but just an absurd amount of employees laid off by ESPN, very talented employees at that, and the crazy thing about the whole situation is that ESPN might not even be finished. According to Stephen A. Smith on his show First Take, which airs on ESPN, this ain't the end. More is coming, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, I could be next. For Stephen A., one of ESPN's biggest personalities on the entire platform, to say something like that is definitely eye-catching. I'd like to know who will be replacing all these reporters, anchors, and other personnel, because laying off 20 employees is big. Maybe Stephen A. is exaggerating like he's known to do, but I think someone as respected as him within ESPN would know some of the details as to what is going on behind the scenes. If he's serious about there being more potential layoffs, then I think ESPN is doing something wrong. Now, to their credit, the broadcast industry has seen better days. I think most of us are aware of that. ESPN might be justified in their decision to lay off so many talented media personalities, but so far, I am yet to have seen a justification for releasing so many employees. Anyway, with that chunk of news out of the way, we'll move into the focus of today's show, which is looking ahead to the 2023 NFL season. I've been giving my season predictions for each division, and the last division we looked at was the NFC North. In this week's show, we will look at the AFC North, starting with the Baltimore Ravens. With Lamar Jackson finally locked up on a big contract, the Ravens can finally focus on putting pieces around him. It shouldn't have taken this long, but this offseason they did, signing Odell Beckham Jr. and drafting Zay Flowers. Jackson is also working with a solid running game and an elite tight end in Mark Andrews. Also, the Ravens have a pretty talented defense, especially after acquiring Roquan Smith midway through last season. Things are looking up for Baltimore, but they still need to worry about the competition in their division. The Ravens do have an easy first game against the Texans in Week 1. I have them winning that game there, but in Week 2, they face the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, it's early in the season. Cincy has struggled early on before, so they could win here. However, I've got Joe Burrow taking care of business and forcing the Ravens their first loss in Week 2. Then in Week 3, the Ravens face the Colts, who I have them beating. Week 4 is my first real upset loss for the Ravens when they play the Cleveland Browns. Call me crazy, but I think Cleveland actually splits several of their opponents this season. Deshaun Watson, with a full offseason, could be a much better quarterback than what we briefly saw last year. With that in mind as well, Nick Chubb still being on their roster, Cleveland could ice Baltimore here. In Week 5, it's another division matchup, this time against the Steelers. I have the Steelers actually winning this game because, just like Cleveland, Pittsburgh will be competitive this season, so I wouldn't take them for granted. Then again, the Ravens are just as competitive, at the very least, and are more than capable of winning this game. The Ravens move back into their winning ways after facing the Titans in Week 6, who I have them beating. Then there's a game I expect to be close for the Ravens against the Detroit Lions. I have Baltimore winning this one, but the Lions will be very competitive this year, so don't expect this game to be a blowout. Week 8 is a matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. Should be a win for the Ravens here, as Arizona is in shambles. A pretty doable start to the season. I could see Baltimore starting off undefeated through the first 8 weeks if things go their way. The Ravens then move on to face the Seattle Seahawks in Week 9, and this is another one of those games I have Baltimore winning, but it won't be easy. Week 10, the Ravens keep heating up as they'll knock down the Browns and then move on to take down the Bengals as well. The Ravens losing to each division rival to start the season just to improve at the back end seems weird, but hey, it's my prediction and it could happen. Baltimore keeps a full head of steam going as they face the Los Angeles Chargers on the road in LA during Week 12. Could be a real nail-biter, but I have the Ravens winning here. Then the Ravens finally get a bye week in Week 13 before facing the Rams in Week 14, who I have them beating easily. Then in Week 15, they are on the road to play the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that has improved a lot since last regular season. They should be hot and in a position to win, and I have them doing so against the Ravens. Followed by this game, I have Baltimore losing 2 more matchups as they face the 49ers on the road, followed by the Dolphins. San Francisco might just be my Super Bowl pick for this season, as long as they figure out their quarterback situation. And Miami narrowly defeated Baltimore last season, and after a great offseason, I don't see why they can't repeat a win this season. Then to close out the regular season in Week 18, Baltimore will be at home to play their rivals in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look, I actually work with a Steelers fan, and I already know how he's going to react when the Ravens pull out a win here to close things out. Again, my prediction, but Baltimore ought to close out a good regular season with a win. And to be honest, the Steelers might get swept by Baltimore this season. Yeah, I mean it too. Don't worry about my coworker though, he doesn't listen to the show. Anyway, that would give Baltimore an 11-6 record to finish 2023. With the Bengals in mind, I doubt they finish first in the division, but definitely candidates for second place. Don't be surprised if Lamar Jackson has a bounce-back season and leads this team to an even better record than I just predicted for 2023. The next team we'll look at fell just shy of their second straight Super Bowl appearance last year in the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have a bright future, I'd say, mostly because they've got a guy like Joe Burrow leading the charge offensively. Not to mention other guys on the roster that can make a huge impact, like Burrow's own teammate at LSU, Jamar Chase, as well as guys like T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and potentially Joe Mixon. Not really sure what's going on with Joe Mixon. He struggled a bit last year, and he's had some off-the-field issues. Defensively, the Bengals are looking decent as well, so I don't see any reason to complain about this team. I think they have a chance at actually winning a Super Bowl this year, so I was pretty generous with some of my predictions for 2023. We will start with Week 1 as they take on the Browns on the road. I have Cincinnati beating them. I think Cleveland could shock us this season and really improve from last year, but here in Week 1, I have the Bengals picking up a W. In Week 2, they face another division rival in the Baltimore Ravens. For this game, they will be at home, and with that in mind, I'm taking the Bengals here. And on that note, talking about home games and road games, I saw a very interesting statistic the other day that could potentially be of some use to the Bengals. Out of all total miles that each team will have to travel to face various road opponents, Cincinnati has the fewest out of all 32 teams, having to travel just 11,942 miles. Now obviously, that is quite a lot of miles to travel, but considering in context that is for a full NFL season, that's not bad at all, because on the other token, the most miles to be traveled for road games goes to Seattle, who will need to travel nearly 32,000 miles in total this season. I'd say the Bengals road game-wise have a pretty decent schedule this season. Anyway, back to my prediction. In Week 3, the Bengals will go up against the Los Angeles Rams, and it should be a pretty easy win for them here. Then, moving on to Week 4, I have them grabbing yet another win, this time against the Tennessee Titans. Then I have the Bengals moving on to knock down both the Cardinals and Seahawks in Weeks 5 and 6, which fall right before the bye week for Cincy. They'll get a good chance to rest up before a very big game against the San Francisco 49ers in Week 8. This will be a tough one, but like I said, they have a bye week prior to this game, so they have plenty of time to prepare. I think the Bengals force one of San Francisco's losses on the season, as few losses I think San Francisco will get. After a big win in Week 8, the Bengals will then move on to face another tough opponent in the Buffalo Bills. The Bills haven't played great against the Bengals in recent memory, but this time I've got Buffalo flipping the script and winning big here against Cincinnati. And this is actually pretty crazy because the Bengals would have been undefeated at this point in the season. To my credit, it could happen, man. The Bengals are a fierce team, and it's due time that Burrow gets a ring. Anyway, the Bengals will bounce back the following week in Week 10 against the Texans. Should be a big win for them there. Week 11, though, it's a rematch between them and the Baltimore Ravens. This time I have the Ravens winning. Baltimore will be at home here in Week 11. Maybe Lamar has built up a little more chemistry with his squad. I'm giving them the win. I could see the Ravens beating the Bengals earlier in the season as well. They'd probably have less injuries at that point, and that is something Baltimore struggles with, is injuries. Moving on to Week 12, though. Cincinnati braces for a home game against the Steelers. I have the Bengals winning there. Then in Week 13, the Bengals will play the Jacksonville Jaguars. Call me crazy, but I think Jacksonville actually wins here in this game. There's a lot of factors that go into this, but to keep things short and sweet, give me Trevor Lawrence with the new weapons he's got on that offense. They do pick up a win against the Colts the following game in Week 14, though, followed by another win at home against the Vikings in Week 15. Great stuff from the Bengals, I know, but then they run into some trouble in Week 16. They're on the road in Pittsburgh. It could be a tough game for them here, and one that I have the Steelers actually winning. Maybe I'm wrong, but hey, I think the Steelers can get a win against the Bengals at least once this season. Then in Week 17, it's the infamous matchup between the Chiefs and the Bengals. Man, this will be another good game, as it always is. I wanted to have Kansas City winning this game, but they're bound to lose a few games, right? Why not this one? So the Bengals, I have them picking up a big win in Week 17, and then to close it out, in Week 18, they have a home game against the Browns. Maybe Cleveland causes some problems towards the end of the season, I don't know. I do have the Bengals winning this game, though, to close the season out strong. But again, maybe Cleveland has a massive improvement from last season and actually manages to make a stand. With all of that, though, Cincinnati would be finishing the season with 13 wins and 4 losses, more than likely winning the division when it's all said and done. How about those Bengals with Joe Burrow? I think he's bound to have another great season coming up this year. You've been listening to the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. We've still got 2 teams to cover in the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, a pretty competitive division this coming season, and we'll take a look at their schedule and I will share just how good or how bad those 2 teams might be this season. Stay tuned, that's coming up next.
We're talking football. You got a problem with that? This is the Sideline Sizzle.
Welcome back to the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. Last segment, we covered the Baltimore Ravens and Cincinnati Bengals schedule for the upcoming 2023 NFL regular season. Now we will move on and look at the rest of the AFC North, starting with the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, what can I say? They gave up all that value for Deshaun Watson, and it hasn't quite panned out yet, but maybe Watson takes a leap this year. I just feel like the Browns are a weird team this coming season. If Deshaun Watson returns to form, boom, playoff team. If Deshaun Watson performs like he did in the small sample we saw of him last year, boom, losing record. And it isn't just Deshaun Watson that carries a lot of the weight here, it's multiple other factors as well, like can Kevin Stefanski coach a winning team again? Will the running game hit the same without Kareem Hunt? That one is probably a yes. How will the defense hold up this season? Will they improve from last year? So many question marks around this Browns team, and it could be a very telling year for them. If Cleveland doesn't sort out all of this, then they might as well re-enter rebuild mode and call it a day, because if the coaching isn't fixed and the quarterback play isn't improved, they're done. Anyway, let's look at the schedule. I think overall, I gave Cleveland a fairly modest prediction. They are very capable of outperforming the prediction I gave them, but like I said, a lot of question marks with this team, and they could definitely underperform as well. I don't really know. The Browns have me stumped in a way. In Week 1, though, they faced the Bengals at home. They beat Cincinnati last year, surprisingly, and, maybe they will do it again. I just don't see it this season, so I have them losing that game to open the season. Then in Week 2, they are on the road to face the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team who, as of right now, is better on paper and better statistically in a few areas. Gonna have to give Cleveland a loss there. Week 3, Cleveland does grab a win, though, as they face the Tennessee Titans. Assuming Will Levis isn't the starter at this point, I can't see the Titans doing much against Cleveland, and if Deshaun Watson takes a legitimate leap, he'll find ways around the Titans' stout defense, the only bright spot on the team next to Derrick Henry. Then in Week 4, they're riding a bit of a morale boost as the Baltimore Ravens roll into Cleveland, a game that I actually have the Browns winning. I think Cleveland can potentially split with all their division rivals this season, and with that said, I have them beating the Ravens early on. The Browns will then get a chance to rest up early in the season, as they have a bye week during Week 5. The following week, though, it's a brutal matchup between the Browns and the 49ers, a team that I consider to be one of the best in the NFL, and potentially the best in the NFC. So given that, I have the Browns losing that one. They will move on to face the Colts in Week 7, though, a team that Cleveland matches up against pretty nicely, so give the Browns a win here. In Week 8, they will travel to play the Seattle Seahawks, and in all honesty, I could see Cleveland causing problems for the Seahawks, but it's a road game for the Browns and won't be easy. Playing in Seattle is one of the hardest stadiums to play in, strictly because of the noise. Lumen Field was actually designed to enhance the sound from the audience, making it difficult to hear anything while on the field. So after a loss to Seattle in Week 8, they face the Cardinals in Week 9, a pretty easy game for them. The Cardinals are the NFL's punching bag at this point, so give it to the Browns. Week 10 is the Browns rematch with the Ravens in Baltimore. Probably won't win this game, so giving Cleveland a loss here. In Week 11, they have yet another rematch game, this time with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Unlike their initial matchup, this is a home game, and one that I could see Cleveland winning, so I have the Steelers falling here. Week 12, Cleveland is on the road in Denver to play the Broncos. you know what I'm going to say. Give it to the Broncos here. Cleveland is not winning this game. Week 13, they will get a win against the Los Angeles Rams. Doesn't matter if it's on the road. LA isn't the same, especially later in the season once injuries could potentially set in. Week 14, the Browns are at home against the Jaguars, and Jacksonville maybe could have struggled with a game like this last year, but this team has ascended past that. Give me the Jags here. Week 15 is a relatively easy game against the Bears. I think Cleveland will win here. Then another easy game for them against the Texans here in Week 16, before finishing the season with a bit of a tricky stretch of games. In Week 17, they play the Jets, and if Deshaun Watson actually takes off this season, I could see them winning this, maybe, but in all honesty, I've got the Browns losing here. Then to close things out in Week 18, the Browns play the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a road game for Cleveland, and the Bengals will be looking to close out the season strong. Plus, the Browns might not even have anything to play for at this point, so with that in mind, give me the Bengals, leaving the Browns with a final record of 8-9 to close out the year. It is an improvement from last season, but again, a lot of question marks surrounding this team. Will Deshaun Watson return to full form? Can Kevin Stefanski get this team back in the win column? And can this team remain healthy for a majority of the season? These are all things that bank on whether or not the Cleveland Browns succeed this year. And right now, I just see too many question marks to leave them with a winning record. So I admit my prediction is a bit harsh, but as I just said, I do have my reasons, and Browns fans, you should too. But if it makes you feel any better, Browns fans, I am rooting for you guys to turn things around once again this coming season. Moving on to the last team we'll be looking at in today's show, as well as the only other AFC North team we haven't yet covered, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers somehow find themselves with a winning record each and every year, regardless of whether or not they make the playoffs. Mike Tomlin, he's just got this gift to where he can coach this team to a winning record regardless of the circumstances. It's honestly sick. So, while I'm doubtful of the Steelers this season, not out of any sick hatred for the team, just out of realism, I think Pittsburgh does well this year. They have a tough defensive unit along with an offense that, believe it or not, is starting to come together. People forget about how talented wide receiver Deontay Johnson really is, and lined up alongside him is George Pickens, who will be entering his second season and could have a breakout year. They've also got Najee Harris, who I have my doubts about, but the guy is so durable that they can just lean on him all game long, and he'll be fine. Oh, and can't forget about Pat Freiermuth. He can have a good season coming up as a tight end. And then, of course, Kenny Pickett, who is also entering his second year like George Pickens, and actually performed surprisingly well last season once Mitch Trubisky was out of the picture. So, with all that in mind, I honestly would be disappointed if Pittsburgh doesn't end with a winning record this season, but at the same time, I'd be shocked if they go anywhere above 10 or 11 wins. Starting off for the Steelers in Week 1, they play the 49ers, a very tough opening game for them, and they might play well and actually get a win here. I could see that happening opening weekend, but I have them losing here to a really good team. The following games are actually pretty manageable, and I have the Steelers going with the best case scenario following Week 1 because I'm giving them a bit of a win streak. Week 2, they play the Browns, and I think the Steelers win that game, followed by another win in Week 3 when they play on the road against the Raiders. Week 4 is another road game, but they play the Texans, so that should be an easy win there as well. Then in Week 5, they have another big challenge to open the season against their division rivals in the Baltimore Ravens. With it being a home game and the Steelers having opened the season with a full head of steam after Week 1, I've actually got them winning their initial matchup with Baltimore. The Steelers will then head into the bye week with smiling faces before matching up with the Rams in Week 6 and totally blowing it. The Rams still have fragments of their Super Bowl winning team, despite how awful they look right now, and I think that Pittsburgh is good, but definitely will slip up here and there. This is just one of those uh-oh games where I think the Steelers could be tripped up. The following game is against the Jaguars in Week 8, and with it being a home matchup, I could see the Steelers winning this, but out of respect for Jacksonville, I have Pittsburgh losing 2 straight here. Then in Week 9, the Steelers stay at home to face the Titans. Should be a game they win here in Week 9. They then play the Packers in Week 10. I still don't buy the Jordan Love hype from Green Bay fans, and he will really struggle against a defense this good, so I have the Steelers beating Green Bay. Then in Week 11, the Steelers will have a rematch with the Browns, this time in Cleveland, and I have them losing here to the Browns. Hopefully Deshaun Watson is playing at a higher level up to this point. Week 12 is another loss for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they take on Cincinnati on the road. However, in Week 13, they have it fairly easy against the Arizona Cardinals, more than capable of beating this team, so give the Steelers a win here. In Week 14, I had trouble deciding a definite winner for this game between the Steelers and Patriots because they seem closely matched in some aspects. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I see Bill Belichick picking up a win here. However, for me, this seems like a toss-up game that could ultimately go either way. Week 15, things go back to being a little easier as the Steelers play the Indianapolis Colts. unless rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson torches this Steelers defense, I think Pittsburgh will do well here and grab a much-needed win. Then they ride that winning wave back home when they take on the Bengals once again, this time on their own turf. Maybe I'm crazy, but give me the Steelers in this game. I think the Bengals will slip up a little here in Week 16, and the Steelers will get a huge win at the back end of the year. At this point, Pittsburgh could be pushing for a playoff spot, but they have two tricky opponents to close out the season in the Seahawks and Ravens, and I actually have the Steelers losing both these matchups against the Seahawks in Week 17 and the Ravens in Week 18. I think the Steelers are capable of doing better than their record I've predicted indicates. They're just in such a tough division, though. Anyway, their final record for 2023, based on my thoughts, would put them at 9 wins and 8 losses. It's still a winning record, just not an improvement from last year. I do think overall, though, as a team, the Steelers will improve and could do much better than what I've predicted if they can keep their guys healthy and developing. And that is it. All of the NFC North covered game by game and team by team. The final tally would put the Cincinnati Bengals at the top of the division, followed by the Ravens, Steelers, and then Browns, who are coming in last place. That'll do it for today's show. We appreciate you tuning in, and we will catch you next week right here on the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm.